please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's Log, Subdates 230911.7. When one gets bogged down with too much crime, one has to redouble their efforts as best they can. So what really helps is a fantastic, nay brilliant coping mechanism of brutalizing the NPC crew. Hi everyone. While today's video topic typically falls under the banner of Halls of Injustice, I'm not going to address it as such. I should, but since views within the Halls of Injustice are absolutely horrendous, I thought perhaps instead we'd address this as a individual topic and hope that it doesn't do anywhere near as badly as any other crime content I do, yet I enjoy making. Today we're going to talk about Danny Masterson. I have been collecting sources on Danny Masterson for quite some time, much like Lucy Letby in fact. The reason why is because Danny Masterson, the actor, was accused of quite heinous crimes. S.A. assault, he's in prison for 30 years to life. Quite a lengthy sentence for somebody at the age of 47. It is unlikely he'll see the outside of a prison cell without the use or aid of a Zimmer frame. What I'm going to do, much like Halls of Injustice, I'm going to tell you a bit about Danny Masterson, because many of you might have heard of him, many of you might not have, and there is nothing wrong with that. Danny Masterson's also tied to a cult, yes, that likes to tout itself as a church. And I think that also fascinating to add to it, because there are members of the cast of the show he was known for, most notably anyway, that were also a part of this cult. Whether or not it ties into what he did, we'll get to when we get there. So, Danny Masterson is a 47-year-old actor who was active from 1980 to 2018. He is married and has one child. He started off as a child model and featured in magazine articles and TV commercials from the age of 5. He was in musicals by the age of 8, and by the age of 16 he had appeared in over 100 commercials. So yes, you can argue Danny Masterson is a form of child star. In the early 1990s, he had a role in Beethoven's Second, Beethoven being that rather large Saint Bernard, yeah that. He was in a TV show called Sybil, but got his major break in That 70s Show. He starred in all 8 seasons of that show. This launched his career and got him on other TV shows, guest appearances. It helped him out a lot, okay? When you're on a TV show for that long, with the likes of Topher Grace, Ashton Kutcher, Wilma Valderrama, and so on, yeah, you kinda stand out. Interestingly, when the show was revived with That 90s Show, he was the only member of the original cast not to be invited back, and his character, Stephen Hyde, was never mentioned. Other activities he would partake in would include DJing in LA nightclubs. He went under the name DJ Donkey Punch. Yeah, I know, quite creative. He was also an avid poker player. In 2011, he married actress Bijou Phillips, and they have a daughter who was born in 2014. This is all you need really to know about who he is, but perhaps I should add, while many of the original cast wrote letters of support for Danny Masterson, and there is fallout to that of course, one of them did not. I say one, I think it was actually 2. But the most notable who did not was Topher Grace, who for years was portrayed as a bit of a dickhead for not really backing his friends, for not being there with them, for them. Now in hindsight, you kind of realise he might have known something sooner, because allegations came out over a period of time concerning Danny Masterson, which had me at one point question whether the statute of limitations apply. Doesn't matter really, because we have an end result. Danny Masterson's career abruptly ended in 2018, because in 2017, a 4th victim had come forward with allegations to the LA Police Department. Netflix fired him from the comedy series The Ranch. His career died the moment that happened. Previous allegations, though, had been, let's say, not necessarily ignored, just nobody acted on them because we presume innocence until proven guilty here, folks. We do not presume guilt until proven innocent. And I should insert now, another reason why many of these allegations didn't get much traction is because One of the accusers characterized pressure that they had received from the church Danny Masterson was a member of, called Scientology. I'm not a fan of Scientology at the best of times, as it is not a religion, but you're welcome to believe whatever you want to believe. I just refuse to pay a subscription service to any belief system. But if you want to believe in something and give up your money in the process, I have a Patreon. Use that instead. I should probably add one additional thing about something I've earlier mentioned. The group from That 70s Show, as a cast, excluding Topher Grace, were very close. Those close ties were retained to the point where many of them actually worked on each other's relevant acting projects. And a number of people who were on that show, or were also members of the Church of Scientology, who have left. Laura Prepon, who played Donna in the show, being the most obvious. She actually left in 2016 after joining in 1999. I would assume she joined around the time she started dating Danny Masterson's brother, Christopher Masterson. Another former member of the Church of Scientology, Leah Rimini, has a show called Aftermath. Episodes of that show focused on the allegations against Danny Masterson, and they were delayed because of Scientology. She's suing Scientology though, so it should be quite interesting to see how that unfolds. Since the leader of the Church of Scientology has gone underwater, ground, somewhere, probably in space, you never know at this point, it's hard to pin him down and serve him with any legal documentation. In March of 2017, 3 women filed S.assault allegations against Danny Masterson. Through his agent, he denied all allegations. In December 2017, a 4th victim came forward. A few weeks after he was removed from the ranch, a 5th woman made similar allegations. He was then dropped by his agency, United Talent Agency, so the agent couldn't speak on his behalf anymore. Cedric Bixler-Zavala, the singer for the bands The Mars Volta and At the Drive-In, also alleged that Danny Masterson sexually assaulted his wife and stated that At the Drive-In's song Incurably Innocent is in fact about the incident itself. In the case of Cedric, he reported that Scientology had actually been trying to lean on him to withdraw his accusations. For example, one of his family pets had to be euthanized due to being fed rat poison wrapped inside a rolled up piece of raw meat. He alleged that that was done because he went very public against Danny Masterson touching his wife, who was one of the 4 women who filed their suit against Danny Masterson, which we'll get to in a moment. Danny Masterson in January 2020 had not directly responded to any of the claims or the prior allegations made. The closest acknowledgement only came from his wife, Bijou Phillips, making an Instagram post mocking court papers against Danny. In August 2019, 4 women filed a lawsuit against Danny Masterson and the Church of Scientology for stalking and harassment stemming from their allegations. They had alleged that Scientology have mobilized an aggressive fair game campaign against them, and while each plaintiff's campaign differed, each had commenced after they individually had left the Church of Scientology. One claimed her dog had died from unexplained traumatic injuries to its trachea. Another stated she had her neighbors observed a man snapping pictures from a driveway, and then someone broke a window in her 13-year-old daughter's bedroom. Danny Masterson did address one of these by claiming, "I'm not going to fight my ex-girlfriend in the media like she's been baiting me to do for more than 2 years. I will beat her in a court and look forward to it because the public will finally be able to learn the truth and see how I've been railroaded by this woman. And once her lawsuit is thrown out, I intend to sue her and others who jumped on the bandwagon for the damage they caused me and my family." He did not address the second, so he focused on the first one. On the 17th of June 2020, Danny Masterson was charged with sexually assaulting a 23-year-old woman in 2001, a 28-year-old in early 2003, a 23-year-old woman in late 2003. These 3 counts came after a 3-year investigation that began in 2017 when the initial accusations came to light. On the 7th of June 2021, Danny Masterson pled not guilty to all allegations made against him between 2001 and 2003. Danny Masterson's defense attorney accused the 3 women of colluding against him, claiming they were in contact with each other. They also stated that one of the Jane Does had obtained money from Danny in 2004. After his arraignment, he was free on a $3.3 million bail, with a pre-trial hearing set for the 9th of August. During that trial hearing, Judge Almeida rejected the numerous subpoena requests from the defense attorneys, calling them stunningly overbroad, which included requests for LAPD records related to David Miscavige and Shelley Miscavige. a subpoena on the producers of the TV show, Leah Remini, and a subpoena on the investigative reporter. The defense filed a motion to dismiss the case then based on a lack of evidence presented during the May preliminary hearing. That motion was sent to another judge. On the 10th of November, County Judge Ronald S. Cohen ruled that the testimony of the victims was credible and sufficient to support the charges, with a trial set for the 19th of August 2022. It was later rescheduled to October the 11th, 2022 at the request of Danny Masterson's lawyers. He had a rather unique trick for this particular trial. His unique trick was not to testify or call any witnesses in his defense. Both parties rested their cases mid-November and made their closing arguments the following day. Because he provided nothing, called no witnesses, did nothing, he wanted only their side to be visible to show how ludicrous it would be from his perspective. That was how they went with it. The jury was deadlocked for 3 days. He did not help this. Instead of declaring a mistrial, the judge then ordered the jury to resume deliberations the week after Thanksgiving. They continued, the jury that is, to remain deadlocked until a mistrial was declared on the 30th of November 2022. Now I, upon hearing this, had thought that perhaps this wouldn't get a retrial. I wasn't sure if double jeopardy applied, because I'm English, I don't know your Americanisms, alright? The jury foreman said that the panel of 6 men and 6 women leaned towards acquitting Danny Masterson on all counts because they found the testimonies inconsistent and implausible. For instance, one Jane Doe had testified that Danny Masterson threatened her with a gun, but a firearm was not mentioned when she reported to the police. Quote, "The big problem for her credibility-wise was the gun present in the testimony, but not in the early reports. That is a vitally important piece of information to leave out of a report." A new trial was then set and held in April and May of 2023. So that is where we're going to go now. You might have noticed I've skipped over the first trial because there isn't much to it, beyond a little inconsistency here and there, but also Danny Masterson did nothing. He played the hand of, I'm going to see what you guys do, and leave it to everyone else to work out whether or not that is credible or not. Just to be clear on one key detail, it was declared a mistrial because they were hung because they had to return a unanimous verdict. Vital bit of information, something that was not as much a problem in the second trial. Early on in the trial, something quite unusual had happened, and that is that emails between police and victims, along with other materials, had been obtained by the Church of Scientology. The Deputy District Attorney told the trial judge that all this information ended up in the hands of the Church of Scientology, even though it is not a party in the case. And the reason the Deputy District Attorney knew in the first place is because on the 2nd of May, his office was sent an email by Church Attorney Vicky Podbereski titled "False Reports of Stalking by the Church of Scientology." But accidentally, Vicky had included links to the files. But when the Church of Scientology were probed on this, they said the prosecution's insertion of religion into this matter is blatantly unconstitutional, and that the church has no policy prohibiting or discouraging members from reporting criminal conduct of anyone. One of the main cruxes of argumentation from that of the defense was that each Jane Doe had provided different stories initially, and that over time those stories had changed, along with pointing out what he believed to be a massive conflict of interest. For example, he was in a relationship with Jane Doe 3, Jane Doe 3 knew Jane Doe 1, who in turn also knew Jane Doe 2, who had known each other for a number of years, and that their main motivation is not to put Danny in prison, but to get back at Scientology, because they were all members of the Church of Scientology, and that their motivation not only was to bring down Scientology along with Leah Remini, that lady, yes, but also for money, because much like with Leah, who had made herself a considerable amount of money with a book crapping on Scientology, these women would stand to gain some kind of compensation, or a door would be open to do so. That was the claim of the defense. Much like in the first trial, Danny Masterson did not testify on his own behalf. He refused to, but he did throughout the trial deny any wrongdoing. And owing to one of the articles, I actually found something that would actually give us a statute of limitations bit of legal information. During this trial, he has to be convicted on at least 2 of the 3 charges in order to clear a California statute of limitations bar. The Deputy District Attorney Ariel Anson. During this trial, there was more than one Deputy District Attorney involved. This one, Ariel Anson, told the court that the defendant drugged his victims to gain control. He does this to take away his victims' ability to consent. You don't want to have sex? You don't have a choice. The defendant makes that choice for these victims, and he does it over and over again. During closing arguments, Ariel Anson also took shots at the Church of Scientology by emphasizing that the church authorities kept the women, Jane Does 1, 2, and 3, from accepting what had happened to them and from reporting it to the police for years. Quote, "The church taught his victims, RAPE is not RAPE. You caused this, and above all, you are never allowed to go to law enforcement. In Scientology, the defendant is a celebrity and he is untouchable. The church denied having any policy discouraging members from going to law enforcement." The counter to that, from Danny Masterson's defense, was that using Scientology was a massive deflection with the government's case against him. The defense also stated that Claire Headley, a former Scientology official who testified as a prosecution expert in an element not allowed at the first trial, had credibility problems because of a relationship with Leah Remini, yes, her, which is an indicator of bias and motive. One thing that must be acknowledged now when it comes to the nature of this trial is that there is no forensic proof of any drugging, which meant that the prosecution really had to prove everything else. They had to prove it. Don't forget here that his arrest, Danny Masterson's, did not happen for another 15 years after the women say they were RAPED, which during this trial, Ariel Anson believed the women's accounts and the testimony of a police toxicology expert who described symptoms should be enough. Danny Masterson's defense pointed out is there is no evidence of drugs. Ariel Anson presented a case as if she was arguing a drugging case. Maybe it's because there is no evidence of force or violence, and that the women contaminated their testimony by communicating with each other after the police began their investigation in 2016. The jury in this, much like in the first trial, took a long time to come to a verdict, but they got there and they came back with guilty. Because the jury was struggling this time, much like the first, they managed to get a verdict on 2 out of 3. The third, they were hung, completely hung. In fact, it was a deadlock. Hopelessly deadlocked was the quote, in fact, from a number of articles. As an interesting little distraction, Vicky Podberesky. A hearing was scheduled to take place on the same day as the verdict being read, but it was rescheduled because deliberations were still ongoing. So the conflict, it took a while, okay? Sentencing for Danny Masterson was scheduled for the 4th of August. However, we did not get that at all. I promise you, it took a lot longer. Somewhat interestingly, a number of members of the cast of that 70s show, most of them in fact, wrote in letters of support for Danny Masterson. In the case of Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, they did it because they wanted to protect Danny's daughter, to make sure that she got her father for as long as she could have her father. That's going to come back to bite in a moment. We're going to play a video concerning that soon. Danny Masterson, found guilty on 2 counts of forcible RAPE, will serve 2 15-year sentences consecutively, not concurrently, meaning they don't simply get stacked together. No, they don't run at the same time. No, they run one after another. He must also register as a sex offender. He has been sentenced, though, to an indeterminate prison sentence. It's 30 years to life, in the sense that he must serve 25 years and a half before he's even eligible to be considered for parole, meaning that instead of being given a lenient sentence, he was given one of the strongest sentences that he could be given. During victim impact statements, Jane Doe 1 called for a life sentence. Jane Doe 2 said she forgave Masterson and that his sickness is no longer my burden to bear. In a statement read on her behalf, Jane Doe 3 thanked the judge for giving her a chance to use my voice and said she was given her own life sentence of several debilitating ailments, including anxiety. Danny Masterson's defense attorney had actually asked the court to sentence him to 15 years concurrent because he had no criminal prior to this and he has a young daughter. And yet again, by the way, Danny Masterson has said nothing. He was, upon being found guilty, held without bail. While he was awaiting trial, he was not in Gem Pop at LA County Men's Central Jail. He was kept in an administrative segregation unit for his own protection, which I can see that being a prevailing theme for the rest of his life, that he's in prison, while he is simultaneously appealing this which he will be appealing on constitutional grounds as well as evidence-related grounds. So about that Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher thing, because optics were not on their side when it came out. They had written in letters of support for Danny Masterson.
We are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson.
We support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future.
A couple months ago, Danny's family reached out to us and they asked us to write character letters to represent the person that we knew for 25 years so that the judge could take that into full consideration relative to the sentencing.
The letters were not written to question the legitimacy of the judicial system or the validity of the jury's ruling.
They were intended for the judge to read, and not to undermine the testimony of the victims or re-traumatize them in any way. We would never want to do that. And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Our heart goes out to every single person who's ever been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse, or rape.
Christina Ricci, an actress portrayed Wednesday Addams years and years ago, believes that cases like this mean that we now need to start unconditionally believing what people say when they accuse others of S.assault. I'm going to now state, I firmly believed in his innocence until he was proven guilty, because if we jump on a bandwagon and do that, we simply seek to destroy a person's life and never, because we never give them a chance to rebuild. We have seen false allegations being presented in a court many times, and it's rarely reported on when it is the case that they were falsely reported. Innocence must always be presumed until guilty, always. And I should insert before we finish that those who have seen the video of Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis that are themselves victims of what Danny Masterson was found guilty of have been calling them out by indicating they knew long ago and did nothing, because to Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, Danny Masterson was a mentor to them.